Thank you, Wendy Williams. Great presentation. I'm going to quickly do an inventory check to make sure that everyone has the materials that we sent over. Does everyone have a sheet with my face on it and Ryan's face on it? Okay. And you know, Wendy's going to be leaving in a minute, so as soon as she leaves, I'll let you know, and you can finally eat those Kit Kats. Now that the health insurance advisor's gone. So, and then also if you can grab from the middle of the table a page that says the 1% challenge. Wonderful. So I'm going to start with this page right here that is pretty self-explanatory. I'm Chuck Lawless. This is my partner Ryan Block, and we're your advisors on our 401k plan. The reason that we always bring these along is just to remind you that although we like to come out here and speak to you in person, we actually sit at the office most days staring at the phone, hoping that you'll give us a call and want to talk about retirement. So the comforting thing, or we hope the comforting thing to you is that when you call, you're not actually calling halfway around the globe, you're not calling Indonesia and speaking with a stranger, you're actually talking to, you know, 2 local advisors who have already been hired by your company. So we have nothing. Did you bring any life insurance to sell today? Okay, I didn't either. We have nothing to sell you. We're really appointed as a fiduciary, which is a fancy way of saying we have a duty to act in your best interest. Over the years, when people ask us what's the value of having an advisor, I can point to countless conversations where people were concerned, they were alarmed, they were worried, and they were on the verge of making a decision and taking action in their 401k that could have cost them dearly in the long run. By having a rational person on the other end of the phone to really walk you through and talk you through whatever's on your mind, it leads to better decisions, right? Our retirement readiness is a financial issue. It's not an emotional one, right? But sometimes we need to be reminded of that. Additionally, there's been times where people have spoken to a bank, and we're all very good judges of character. We all have very good instincts, and something just didn't sound right, so they wanted a sounding board. They kind of wanted to bounce the scenario off of Ryan and I. There was a young man down in Plymouth, Indiana, when we did a meeting who told us that, hey, I'd love to invest in the 401k, but there's this guy at my mega church who's doubling everyone's money, and I think I'm going to give my money to him. And I'm sure I've told you this story before. We had a good conversation with him. He didn't do it. We actually got his mother's money back, and then 30 days later, the FBI arrived in Plymouth, Indiana, and arrested this guy. There is any financial topic that's worth discussing for you, we want to have that conversation. And again, the only way that we're going to stay in the picture with Lieberman is if you call us, we take very good care of you, and you circle back to Carla and Myra and say, you know what, I had a great experience and they took good care of me. So hang on to this for any time you need it. The other biggest thing that Ryan and I can do as your advisor to help you be prepared for retirement is this 1% challenge. And the reason we created this, it's as simple as it can possibly be. It's a 1-page form. All you have to do is write your name on it, sign it, and we will take care of everything else, which is to say we will increase your contribution to the 401k by just 1%. That penny on the dollar, pre-tax divided by 26 paychecks, you won't notice. So by show of hands, because we collected a lot of them the last time we were here, who turned one in? Okay. Did you notice on your next paycheck a big difference? You didn't. And that's the beauty of baby steps, right? Baby steps are sustainable. If we asked you to jump up by 5%, 2 paychecks down the road, any one of us would say, oh my gosh, what did I just do to myself? But by consistently doing these 1% baby steps, you can do it again and again every year. 36 months in my life goes by like that. I assume that your life is no different. In 36 months, you will have raised your contribution by 3%. That 3% by the time you retire will equate to additional tens of thousands of dollars. So all of us, if asked, would you like another $500 a month to spend in retirement, would absolutely want that additional money to spend. This 1% challenge is a way to get you there. So I'm going to switch, and we'll collect yeah?
So what's the maximum percentage you can do?
So it's actually a dollar amount. So you can do, in theory, you can do 100% of your compensation, but it's $18,000 plus a catch-up contribution of $6,000 if you're over 50 years old. So it's a dollar amount that they limit you on. And I'll open it up for Q&A at the end of the presentation, but that's a great, I like the way you're thinking, right? What's the maximum amount I can put in? That's what I'd like to hear. So I'm going to switch to this presentation right here, which Ryan's actually going to put up on the, we've already got it on the big screen. And I'm going to go to page 2, which is a quote by Peter Lynch. There's a reason that we've got a Peter Lynch theme going in today's presentation, which I'll talk about at the end. He says the key to making money in the stock market or your 401k is not to get scared out of it. If I had a Kit Kat, I'd offer it up. But for a Kit Kat on your table, right, we'll just play along. The stock market for the last 10 years, the S&P 500 is now hovering around 10% compounded for the last 10 years. Does anyone know what the average investor made? 6%, very good guess. Anyone else? About 2.5%. About 2.5%. And it's not fees, it's not the investment performance, it was their own human behavior that drove that. So I'm going to show you a couple slides just to have you think about something going forward. And there's a reason that I'm showing all of this to you. It's a fact, and a proven fact, that as frequently as every year, the stock market can drop by 10%. So my dollar in my 401k can go down to 90 cents before it goes back to $1 and above. It's also a fact, going all the way back to 1890 and trading under the buttonwood tree in New York City, that our stock market, or our 401k accounts, can drop as much as 20% every 3.5 years, right? So it can go from $1 to 80 cents back to $1. And then this is what I really want to show you, is that every 6 to 7 years, usually we can have a 30% pullback in the market or our 401k account before it goes back to the high water mark. So how many years, what year was the last year that we had a 30% decline? 2008, right, 2000, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, 2000, thank you, 2008. So as you can see, it's been a while since this has happened. And it doesn't mean that it's going to happen next week, but it certainly means that there's a time out there in the future where this is going to happen again. Up, go one more. So it's easy for us to stand up here and say it's this linear process. Don't worry, children. It'll drop 10% and then it's going to jump right back, or it's going to drop 20% and then it's going to bounce right back, and you shouldn't be afraid. In reality, this is exactly what it looks like. It's actually vivid, it's scary, it's on TV, it's in the newspaper, it's on our phones, it's all we hear about, it's all people talk about. But I'm going to show you some examples of what you've already been through and have probably forgotten about. Remember this, anyone? Summer of 2010, right? We were told that the Gulf would be destroyed forever, the fishing industry, tourism, everything. And what happened that year, perfect example. The stock market fell 25% and recovered to be up 13% by the end of the year. Right now, by show of hands, truthfully, how many of you remember that the stock market fell 25% in 2010? One man in the back, thank you very much. He remembers. That's good. 2011, same thing. 2012, same thing, right? We have a very short memory for how these things play out, but it's It's actually always the same, right? And one of the nice things that we have as investors is a lack of short-term memory because, again, it allows us to continue to participate. So I'm going to jump ahead in the book to page 12. So down markets are not always a bad thing. Now this is going to surprise you. If I were to ask you what the top performing stock is in the stock market of all time without looking at the screen, what would you tell me? Someone say it. Google, Amazon, right? Apple, right? Facebook. But the truth is, it's actually a very boring stock of Philip Morris, kind of a controversial stock too, right? Surprise, surprise, an old blue chip dividend paying stock. And people ask how that's possible when you have all these tech companies. Well, the answer is this: Philip Morris has always paid a 5% dividend to its shareholders. And in doing that, if you think about getting 5% by owning Philip Morris in the form of a dividend, or having a checking account at Chase that pays you 0.00001% on your money, a dividend-paying stock is actually pretty appealing. So if I put my money into a share of Philip Morris that paid me 5%, and I reinvested that 5% dividend into more shares of Philip Morris, I'd have more shares paying 5%, buying more shares, and it blossoms like clover in your backyard. So $10 invested in Philip Morris in 1925 on dividend reinvest would be worth $2.5 million today. The original example that I used to say was that $1,000 invested in 1925 would be $250 million with B, and then someone told me, well, that's ridiculous because no one had $1,000 in 1925. So I said, well, that's true. So we'll change it to $10. So when we have those periods of market volatility and the market goes down, you are adding to your account every single paycheck. And that dollar cost averaging in those moments where the market's down, you're actually doing more for yourself than you are buying in when the market's at an all-time high. So there's a little quote by Shelby Davis that says you make most of your money in a bear market or a down market, you just don't realize it at the time. So I'm going to jump to 14 and take you down a little trip of memory lane. So this chart, this slide in your book, is actually looks more complicated than it really is. But each one of these bars shows us a 10-year period in time, historically. So on the far left side of the page, 1928 to 1937, 1929 to 1938. And we had shown this to you a few years ago to point out that you do have 10-year periods where the market has a negative return for that 10-year window of time. But what always follows that? If you have a little bit of red, what follows? You end up having a lot of green. And our advice to you at the time was based upon those 3 red bars with your 401k, I would be socking away as much as you possibly can, because after you have red, you have a lot of green. And as we discussed in the previous slide, it's now been 10 years since 2008 that we've had a 30% correction. So going ahead, I'm going to jump all the way to page 24. And I'm going to ask you to hold it on 24 and don't turn the page. So here's a little riddle for you, which I would toss out a Kit Kat if anyone can get the right answer. So the black and white photo is a picture of my son being born 90 days after the September 11th attacks. The photograph in color on the right was 10 years later. So you've got these 2 images, right? These 2 windows in time. And the question is, what is the greatest obstacle that all investors face? Can anyone tell me? Time is the #1 answer. Fear, second most common answer. Anyone else want to guess? Okay. I'll tell a little side story. So we all remember, all of you remember where you were the morning of 9/11. We all have a personal story, we all have a personal memory of how we felt how scared we were, how shocked we were, and again, kind of panicked in a way, right? The markets were collapsing, as you recall. I'm in this industry. I've got all of you to be concerned about. Well, how do I get out in front of the clients and try and make sense of all this? And then at the same time, I've got a young child, and I'm thinking, what kind of world did I just bring this child into, right? Many of you may have thought the same thing, and then fast forward 10 years into the future, right? What happened? Life worked out. Time marched on. And I guess the problem I had in the black and white photograph, which is the problem all of us have, we don't have the ability to look into the future. We all think we have this crystal ball and we know what's going to happen, and we don't. And the Dow Jones in the black and white photograph was 6,500. In the color photograph 10 years later, it was 13,000. So now I go back and I think about how I felt that day on 9/11 and everything in the recession that followed, and realize what I should have been thinking about was investing in my 401k for my future in that moment. Because the 10 years that followed was actually great. And it doesn't always just stop there. It keeps going. 6,500 to 13,000, and then another 6 years later, we're at 25,000. So I know that there's a lot of things that are worrisome right now, and I know there's a lot of negative stuff on TV. But that is not a solution to your retirement readiness. 23 years I've been doing this. I've outlived, knock on wood, the day's not over, but I've outlived a lot of presidents. I've outlived a lot of administrations. I've outlived all that stuff. And the participants who took our advice, which is the long view, have done really, really well, right? So I'm going to ask a little question. When are the two biggest updates? I'm going to see who was paying attention last time. John, you can't answer this. When are the two biggest updates for the stock market going to happen this year? Two biggest updates for the market this year. I know when they're going to happen. I just want to know if you know when they're going to happen.
Black Friday.
Black Friday, number one answer, which means the second most common answer would be Cyber Monday. The two biggest updates for stocks are going to follow immediately after.
The midterm.
Not the midterms, but that's a good guess.
Election.
No. The two biggest updates will follow immediately after the two biggest down days. And if you make a change midstream, you get all of this, but you don't get any of this, right? So in those moments, it's important to remember, give Ryan and I a call. You know, if you're having that fight or flight feeling and you want to take action, we're here for you. I'm going to jump ahead. Let's just go to page 30. I wasn't going to cover this, but I'm going to quickly cover this. Reasons you should be excited, okay? Reasons that no matter what you see on TV, you know, this is the future should excite you. And I tell this to my kids all the time. Here's a little landscape of the world. Ryan and I travel around the country, and we do these meetings in meat lockers, we do these meetings in coal mines, we do these meetings everywhere. West Coast, East Coast, Rust Belt, you name it. As different as everyone is, as unique as every employee is at every company, they all have one thing in common. They all carry what in their pocket? Smartphone, right? Every human virtually on Earth has a smartphone, whether they're a CEO or whether it's Jimmy in the mailroom at Mesirow, everyone's got a smartphone. And what people don't think about, right now there's 1.3 billion, just using China as an example, there's 1.3 billion in China, people in China. And more people speak English in China than the rest of the world combined. Did you know that? More English-speaking people in China than the entire rest of the world. So in this day and age, since everyone, no matter what their standing is, has a smartphone, for $15 and a Wi-Fi connection, they can incorporate through the state of Delaware for $20 and have an S-Corp or an LLC up and running in 15 minutes. And then your son, your daughter, stepchild has access to 1.3 billion people in China who speak English, and through social media, whether they're selling lemonade, whether they're making t-shirts, they have a market open to them like we've never seen before. It's gonna be exciting, right? There's gonna be a lot of ways and a lot of people to do business with. So let's go to, I'm gonna wrap up here with 5 things that you will not see, will not hear in any other meeting but this. And I'm gonna, go into some taboo subjects here because we're always told we're not supposed to discuss politics. But today I can't help it. And I'm gonna give you 5 good reasons or things that you probably don't know as to why this market can continue to go up despite everyone saying that it can't. You probably won't believe this, it's hard to explain. The better the approval ratings in Washington, the worse the investment performance. The worse the approval ratings, the more stocks climb. It's always been that way, it always will be that way. It's a big surprise that no one actually can fathom or understand why. I, in my own 23 years, have come up with my own thoughts behind it. It's not empirically proven. It's just a gut feeling, which is, I think, when the public is upset, it means, hopefully it means, that things can only get better. On the flip side, by the time I have that full tummy post-Thanksgiving dinner feeling where everything's great in the world, life is swell, and you know what? Those folks down in Washington, they're not that bad, because I've just had the biggest year I've ever had. The company's had the biggest year it's ever had. And by the time we're ready to lend a compliment to the government, things are probably as good as they can possibly be. So where are approval ratings right now? Not so good. That being the case, this market can continue to climb. Go on more. The other thing that no one's talking about, and they should, especially in the world of real estate, right? This is something you'll understand. The number of publicly traded stocks to invest in, every mutual fund, every individual investor, we're all limited to the same supply of stocks that we can buy. The number of stocks available has been cut in half, and no one thinks about it. Because what happened in the dot-com boom? Half those companies went out of business. What happened in 2008? 14 different banks suddenly merged into one. So if half the number are available to invest, and my money and your money and every mutual fund's money is chasing a smaller pool of stocks, what's going to happen? It's going to continue to go up, right? If half the homes in Rolling Meadows disappeared overnight, what would happen to home prices? They'd probably go up. At the very least, they could retain their value. Another thing too, right now we have gone in, we've crossed over into what's called a secular bull market, meaning that it's going to be a period most likely that lasts more than 10 years. Right now, we're only 5 years into this secular bull market, and a lot of people feel like it should come to an end, right? We're seeing what's going on in CNN, we're seeing everything in the world, and we're saying, you know what, this possibly can't continue, but it doesn't work like that. With all the stimulus, 3 different rounds of stimulus that took place and all the work that they did over the last 8 years, it's tough to stop a freight train. If you look at prior bull markets, secular bull markets, you'll see things like this. 1921 to 1929, it lasted 8 years, 503% total return. In the 50s, it went up 292% over 15 years. In the 80s, it went up 1,200% over 20 years. And right now, we're only 3 years into this since we surpassed the prior peak, and people already think it's over. So there's a lot of reasons, a lot of things that you can point to say that it won't end. It's good. Another thing too, talking politics is taboo, but this you'll find interesting. Go to the next page. If you trace a line historically from the low water mark of a president's second year to the high water mark of a president's third year, the average jump is 46%. And even President Hoover, with 25% unemployment and people living in cardboard boxes in Central Park, New York, still got a 23% bump. So this is interesting. I know I'm an economic nerd, and I find this stuff interesting, and you might not. But this is a book that I've saved from college. It was written in the 1930s, so you have to, I apologize in advance for kind of the outdated language in it. But the fundamental concept is absolutely as true today as it was back then. There are two ways and only two ways that a bull market will end. They don't die of old age. They never have. This party that we're on either has to end in a mania, where it's back to wild speculation on all of our parts, and younger investors like the millennials who right now are skeptical of this bull market would suddenly have to be converted into thinking this is the greatest thing ever, right? A mania, like the real estate bubble. How many people did you know that ran out and got a real estate license? Or you had a family member that suddenly started flipping 3 flats because they were an instant guru in real estate. Those are all the hallmarks of a bubble. In 1999, my grandmother, saying she wanted to sell her GE stock that paid a dividend so she could buy some tech thing that I'd never heard of, right? That was a bubble. Do you know anyone in your personal life right now that's doing anything out of the ordinary? I don't. Is anyone wildly speculating with money? When the Bitcoin thing first happened, that caught our attention, but that fizzled out pretty quickly. So that's one way that it can end. The other way is it would end by the Federal Reserve raising interest rates so strongly that they choke the economy and force us into a recession. That they are raising rates in baby steps, but not to the point where it would strangle the economy. So again, this market could grind higher. Final slide and then final comment. So this is Peter Lynch, if you ever wondered what he looked like. I started the presentation with a quote from Peter Lynch, and I'm wrapping it up with Peter Lynch actually for 2 reasons. So when people tell me that what we're seeing in stocks right now is just like the late 90s in the dot-com era, I'm quick to point out that they clearly weren't around in the dot-com era, because this is nothing like that dot-com era. I just mentioned earlier that the S&P 10-year average is at 10% for 10 years. During this period, it was 17% for 10 years. So you saw that one slide showing the 1980s market went up 1,200%. Think of how much rocket fuel a GPA, right, your college or your high school GPA, if you're at a 2.0 senior year and you want to get to a 2.5 or 3.0, how much rocket fuel do you need to raise that GPA? A ton. Imagine trying to move from 10% to 17% on a 10-year average. So you look at those returns. This was February of 1999. You've got a life of the fund 27% compounded. So again, that was at the tail end of a bull market. We're still far from that. The other reason, and this is my final comment for you, and saved, I thought, some good news for the very end, is with your 401k, we've got a really big announcement. We are going to be moving from Principal Financial to Fidelity. And Lieberman's management cares a lot about your retirement readiness. They care a lot about your technology in the 401k, the performance of the 401k. They made Fidelity walk on hot coals and got their fees shoved down. So most importantly, this is going to happen this fall. We cannot wait, because the mobile technology and your desktop technology and the ability that they have in a very quick process to make sure you have the money that you need in retirement is incredible. Beyond that, I actually went to Covington, Kentucky. Post Bernie Madoff, we now physically visit every company that we do work with. We didn't have any money with Bernie Madoff, but everyone in the world learned a lesson in doing that. And in Covington, there's a room this big with 200 registered investment advisors that are fiduciaries waiting for your phone call. And when you call in, your name lights up on that screen, because I sat there and got to watch live calls come in. Your account instantly populates. The next thing that populates is your social security information. If you have other accounts at Fidelity, those things populate and instantly starts gathering information as to what you can expect to have monthly in income in retirement. And it's lights out incredible. They are not paid to sell you anything. They are paid based upon your happiness score, which I think is a good metric for doing business. So more to come on that. We will, walk you through every step, but it's going to be awesome. So I hope you're excited about that. And again, we're excited to move the plan over there. Yes?
What happens when they transfer your funds from Principal.com over to Fidelity? You've got all these stocks and funds invested here. How does it equate to the new transfer where you're not being hurt?
Sure. So everyone heard that. What happens to your current investments at Principal when you make the transfer over to Fidelity? The quick answer is the Department of Labor instituted guidance that they call a QDIA transfer. So a qualified default investment alternative transfer. So what they want to see happen is all of you will be set up to move to a target date fund based upon your peer group or your age or set date for retirement. The reason that they do that is they want to know that everyone, when the money moves over, everyone gets an allocation that's appropriate for their age. You can, ahead of the money going over, log into your account and select your own investments so that you don't have to have that option. But the reason that they did this is that in the past, when advisors would say, well, you had this growth fund at Principal, we're going to put you in this growth fund at Fidelity, and we're going to move this fund, and we're going to map it so that it's like fund to like fund across the board. But there were a couple careless advisors out there where one plan had more choices and one fund had less choices. They triple mapped and quadruple mapped 4 different funds to one fund over here that ended up being Bill Miller's Legg Mason fund, where he doubled down and then tripled down on financials in 2008. And you can imagine if 4 of your funds got mapped to a fund that really got hurt, you wouldn't be happy. And so the DOL said, no more of that. What we're going to do, everyone will get a target date, and then you'll be able to reselect anything that you want. We will create a kind of a guide list for you. So if you really like this fund of Principal, you'll most likely like this fund over here. And we can walk you through the whole process.
You just added a couple of new funds in there in the last few months or 6 months that are really killer. They're really going sky high in returns and stuff. And you hate to lose that now if you're making money.
Wait till you see what we got. If you like that, you're going to love what we're going to show you. Yeah.
And you're making this change when?
This fall. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having us out.
Let me just say one of the things that you're going to like about Fidelity is the fact that Principal was very, very hard on an individual basis for you to look at your funds and figure it out. So most of us had a very passive relationship with our 401k because it wasn't very engaging. It didn't give you a lot of help, a lot of tips, those types of things. What the Fidelity platform does offer you as an individual saver, okay? It doesn't care about me collectively as a group. It cares about you as an individual. And it gives you the ability to intimately be a part of your savings, the money that you're putting in yourself. Now, it also will take care of things for you automatically if you choose not to have that direct relationship with how your money goes. But I will tell you, from a consumer myself, you're really going to like the Fidelity platform. You really are. There's going to be a lot of a lot of ability for you to control and command your destiny with your savings in that respect. The other thing is that Fidelity is very open door friendly. They have Fidelity offices all over the place. So if you're experiencing some concerns or some qualms, not only do you have people like Chuck at Mesirow that you can call up and say, hey, I need some advice, I need some help, I need some guidance. You can also walk in the door of the local Fidelity offices. So I don't want to spend a lot of time because we are at the end of our time, but I wanted to leap in there and assure people that it's going to be a very smooth process for you. You're not going to lose, and you have a lot to gain by developing your own strategies and learning more about it. It makes it easy for you to do that.
And all of you should know that I wasn't joking about the hard work that went into this. So we actually did a full discovery of every, the top tier providers that are out there. And Myra and Carla did a great job getting all of them to, really show how badly they wanted to do business with Lieberman. So it was a great experience. You're going to love it. Thank you all for having us out here today. We